On behalf of the Bengal Club Library Committee, all our wonderful friends who support us by coming, it's a great pleasure to have you all with us. So without further ado, I find great delight, and it's an honor.
Recording in progress.
It's an honor to invite the author of today, Mr. Manish Gaekwad, to come and take a seat. Ever since another author friend of Mr. Gaekwad's introduced the book, The Last Courtesan, I was blown away, really I was, because the writing is so staggeringly real. It is also pulled back. It is what the British would applaud as understatement. Hard to do when you're telling a story about your mother and the trials and travails she went through. I don't know how many of you have managed to read the book. Can I see a show of hands? That's surprisingly not bad. Okay. So the book is basically unique in the way that it captures the history of motherhood, the history of Manish's mother, who was trafficked by her own in-laws in a dire situation somewhere in Maharashtra, near Pune. And she was sold off to an arrangement where many women in India and the rest of the world, which is of the underprivileged, hunger was the moving and touching reality of why Rekha Devi's parents sold her off. And despite the fact that she was trafficked, what I think is admirable is the way she was a visionary, literally remembering Mandela and Nehru, who were political prisoners. But this absolutely amazing spirit was a woman who was the receiver of everything that was domination, masculinist, oppression, and body of the woman being owned for pleasure and for earning money. So this is one part of the story that will come through, I hope, in the conversation that we have with our very active Bengal Book Club members. I'll introduce them in a second. But the second part which struck me was the way personal history intersects with our national history, really. And the history of the kothas, the history of the tawaif, the history of a community of women who tried so hard to keep their dignity and their grace in the face of much oppression. We will be speaking about how the book came about. We will be speaking about what were the epiphanic moments. But more than that, I think we will be able to hear from the son of this visionary mother who put him in the best schools with all her earnings. She went hungry, but she made sure he was enrolled in Kalimpong and in Darjeeling in some of the best institutions. This is a rarity, guys. This is not the story of every son of every courtesan, because there has to be a killer instinct and an instinct to survive and to make something of yourself in the face of the kind of discrimination, the kind of turbulent terror that is faced by a child. So without further ado, just to let you into the fact that Manish looks in his 30s, but he's a few years older than that. And Manish will tell us how this book came about. I was quite astonished to learn that this book was put together between 2020 and 2022. His mother wanted this book written. So you can see where he gets his courage from. So to come out and to say, yes, my mother was the last courtesan of Bobasar, I don't know how many of us in this room would actually step up to that plate. So without further ado, Professor Choitali Moitro, Mrs. Anasuya Pal, and Mrs. Anju Munshi are our interlocutors, and I hope we have a conversation that will open up the doors for you to come in and take part. Enjoy the evening. Okay, so to begin the conversation, Manish, would you like to tell us a little bit about how you figured out with your mother, whom you thought had all this archived, and you found that, hey, it's all lost. So how did you come down and literally re-investigate and rewrite her history?
Thank you so much, Julie, for introducing my mother so magnificently, first through the newspaper Telegraph and now through Bengal Club. And thank you all for coming. Should we start with a song, actually, to set the mehfil? Let me just see if I can play something on my phone.
Hello, Chris. Good to see you.
So, this song in a way encapsulates her life, her philosophy. आज फिर जीने की तमन्ना है, आज फिर मरने का इरादा है. Because when you come from that sort of a background where she grew up in poverty and she was trafficked, survival, her instinct for survival was so strong that she had a sort of stoicism about her. I don't know how that came about. I think it came about also because she saw so much so soon, so early in life, that I feel like it strengthened her spine and softened her gaze about life. And it's like you asked, how did I go about gathering her history? So when I was growing up in the Kotha, my mother would tell me snatches of her life, and I wouldn't pay attention because I was busy reading my own books. There was one incident I remember when she sat with a tape recorder and recorded herself. And she said, someday you will need this audio cassette. And I didn't pay attention. I thought, okay, this woman is just ranting. So over the years, in bits and parts, the stories were coming to me and I was sort of collecting them in my head. But I didn't know how to put it together. I hadn't become a writer myself, so I didn't know what I was going to do with these stories. So in 2018, when my first novel was out, is when I could go back to my mother and tell her and show her proof, saying that this is a novel and I am a writer, and I have dashed all your hopes of becoming a doctor, So now you just have to accept that this is also a way of life. So she then kind of started understanding that she will be okay talking to me at length about her story, which she always wanted to tell. And incidentally, around the same time, I wrote a essay about her, and it had gone viral, and I got a book deal. And so I went back to her and I said, listen, now these publishing houses are sort of auctioning for your story. So एक बार फिर से नीलामी हो रही है. So she found that very funny and amusing, and she said, let's do it. So then I came back to Calcutta during the pandemic, and we tried meeting the other the wives in the quotas who were languishing somewhere near Lal Bazaar. I met a couple of them, and they were reluctant to talk about themselves. Then I met a few children who had grown up with, and they had moved on, and they didn't want to talk about their past, thinking that they are now into a respectable society, and it's an ugly past that they don't want to get back to. So then my mother said, ये सब बात नहीं करेंगे, they are not forward like me. मैं बहुत forward हूँ, तू मुझसे बात कर. So then we sat down and I started recording her, and bit by bit, I mean, there were some portions that were very difficult, but some very easy. But she spoke in a very playful manner. She spoke like she was narrating a comic book adventure, and she didn't dwell on the miseries, and that made it easier for me to sort of put it all together.
So, taking it from there, I think, Manish, what strikes many of us when we discuss your book is that there is no imprint of any sense of being the oppressed, no victimhood. And what you've managed to do, I think, in the book is that you've kept her voice. You've kept her voice, not impinged yourself. And I think that takes a lot of doing for a writer. How do you think, if you can pluck something from your unconscious or your subconscious, how would you say you achieved that? It would be good to know.
So the first draft I started writing was in third person, but it felt very dry. It felt sort of like a journalist who's reporting, because I've also worked as a journalist, and I found it boring. So I went back to her recordings and I listened to her voice, and I thought about how funny and humorous she is. And I thought if I just wrote it just the way she speaks, and so I went back and rewrote it again in her voice, and I realized it was flowing very freely. And because I've used English sort of in a very vernacular manner, where a lot of her dialogues are in Hindi or in Urdu, and so I just followed that, and then a sort of sing-song rhythm started to appear in the writing, and then it was very easy to just go with that.
I think Salman Rushdie would be proud of you, because the idea of chutneyfication of language is what gives the book, you've written a memoir, a sort of post-colonial stamp, And this is a woman who stands up, doesn't fight in the way that we know, doesn't take the battle on, but very surreptitiously, with strategic thinking, she obviates encounters which would be very ugly. Now, on that score, there's one question I have for you, which is explicit, but I think it'll open up the windows for our other conversationists with you.
Yeah, we're all here for the explicit.
Yeah. So, I remember when I asked you, when I met you to interview, what was the and I didn't even think about it, but what you came back with as an answer to my question about what is the most, startling impression that was left with you, such a young boy, so impressionable,
Thank you for revealing my real age.
in a quota. So,
The most lasting impression of the quota.
the most ugly impression, right? Meaning startling impression of your father.
Right.
Would you like to talk about how that affected you as a child? Or did it?
No, Julie. There are scenes in the quota that one sees as a child, and nobody explains to us what is going on. For example, there will be scenes of violence where some of the patrons abuse the wives, and then there will be scenes of some people probably making out in a corner, which is exciting to see as a young child, but also maybe disturbing. But it's all between song and dance. So the ambience is, I think, like an amusement park. And for a child to process that, I don't think the child's is mature enough to understand what is going on, because there's always background music and it's great music. So I would say I wasn't affected about all of these things as a child. My mother didn't come and say कि ये बुरा है और ये अच्छा है, and don't look at this or don't look at that. But of course there is women do shield their children there, but not by telling them what is right and wrong. So we don't think about it. It's only when you grow up and then you have all those childhood trauma about what happened to you, and then you go to a therapist and you realize you have to pay a lot to cure yourself. And I think you find ways to deal with it. Some people find it therapeutic to write, some people find therapeutic to release it in music or...
See a psychotherapist in the
Absolutely, I see that also. So I guess all of us find a way to deal with it. I don't know, how it works for everybody.
Thank you for that very explicit answer. Anju, would you like to carry on the round robin?
Thank you so much, Julie. Thank you, Manish, for being here with us. The book it's like been a tsunami of emotions. It's put many complex emotions on a platter, and by the end of it, it was very, very difficult for me to deal with it, and process it. And I look at it this way: as you grow up, the childhood memories become very hazy, they become very faint. But there are some memories which linger on, the fragrance keeps coming in and out, in your life. And these memories are very closely associated with, the cooking of rice, the aroma of rice being cooked, the cookies being baked in the oven, your father's reassuring grip on your little fingers, your father's words of promise and his words of aspirations for you. So when I read the book, there was a blank space on that particular level which kept staring at me. And that is when I had to actually stop reading the book and to process my own emotions. I think in the memories which the author recollects, these are the memories which are basically the components of his identity. They have basically got together, added up, and made a person with an identity like the author's. And in doing so, he has restored his childhood. He has worked on it, he has processed it, and he has, given it a new lease of life and moistened it, moisturized it in a way. The dry feelings have been moisturized. And to be very honest, Rekha Devi's attitude in the entire book, you know, wherein she has been able to raise her child within a set of, you know, very twisted situation. I mean, all credit goes to her. And also, not even once did I see in the book that she's, you know, complained about losing it to her destiny, complained about reaching the end of the road, complained about having no escape route. On the contrary, like the author just mentioned, there's a lot of humor, there's a lot of positivity, there's a lot of grit, and so much of resoluteness in her complete personality that we have Manish sitting with us today talking about her in such a graceful and such a dignified manner.
Absolutely, absolutely. Manish, would you like to say something?
May I just add that Anju has put it more delicately than I could have tried for.
Thank you. Thank you, Manish.
Anasuya?
Thank you, Julie, and good evening, everyone. And Manish, congratulations. This is a remarkable book. Quite honestly, had I been left to myself, I probably wouldn't have picked it up to read because, you know, like you've read Memoirs of a Geisha and, you know, you think, okay, it's along those lines. But Julie recommended it strongly and I thought, yes, let me give it a try, and am I glad. So, at the very start, I liked your style, the style that you employed to tell the story, because it's very simple, very engaging, and very appropriate to the way she has actually lived her life. And you can make out that she hasn't really allowed all of this to seep into her and embitter her at all. So let's understand, she was not even 12 or 13 when her father supposedly got her married off.
10 years old.
Yeah. And she didn't know that she was trafficked. And she's carrying this debt. And she feels obligated to pay off her debt from a heartless father who sold her off. And even her mother exploited her. Yet you see a girl, she's thrown in a set of circumstances where she's so quick to pick up what she should do and learn and upskill herself and make a go at it. So she's, I think, a die-hard optimist, and she was thrown into the underbelly of the flesh trade in Calcutta. She had to deal with very powerful women and men playing the patriarchal dominant card. And through all of that, she finds a little way out for herself and she makes a go at her life like any person would take a go at their career. And you look at the move she makes. When she came to understand where the money was, she harnesses all that's possible for her, goes to Bombay, she earns better, she supports her parents, she even has that much compassion left in her in spite of all these experiences to look out for her younger siblings, to give them a better life. She not just put you on a higher platform, she helped her siblings as well. What you've achieved with this book, I think, is also a documentation of a slice of history, where we see the emergence of the Tawaif culture and its death in Calcutta, and perhaps the birth of the bar dancers in Bombay. So that flow of the life, you know, from where to where. So that's also got documented effectively. And what stands out brilliantly is her grit and her gumption. And, you know, she just takes it on, finds a way out. She manages to get you to a place where, let me tell you, none of the Nepo kids could have made a better rise than what you have. Where she's put you, from where. So I think she's an amazing mother that you've had, and it's a beautiful tribute on Mother's Day. And so it's cheers to Rekha Devi.
Actually, it's very auspicious and it's propitious that we are having this book launch for Manish today, because it is really between Mother's Day which was on Sunday, and Rekha Devi, his mother's birthday, which he instituted for the 29th of May. So, I think we are honored to honor a woman of such indomitable spirit. Before another song indeed. But before I hand over the microphone to Professor Choitali Moitro, there's one thing I want you to talk about a little bit of what Anju and Anasuya have talked about. And that is, were there times in your life, there were, I know, where you felt that the man that had been chosen by your mother to have you by, and her reason was, if I might make it explicit, was no reasons of any expectations monetary or no reasons of expectations of love, but as Rekha Devi was a very practicable woman, and she felt that these aspersions that were cast on her as being barren would only be vindicated if she had a child. And do you want us to know how brave she was and how no drama, just live it and do it? And how did she do that with a man like your father, whom I am not particularly fond of?
My father, Hashmatullah Khan, was a patron at the Kotha, and with many tawaiffs he sort of tried romancing them, while he also had a family of his own, because like they say, unmarried bachelors don't come to the Kotha because I don't think they can afford that sort of entertainment. So my mother had a couple of suitors before him, but I think he just happened to be the right guy for her to sort of tell the other girls in the Kotha that she's found a virile man who will just help her produce a child, and then she can prove it to everybody that she's also capable of having a child. And she actually wanted a girl. She prayed for a girl, but accidentally she had a boy. And she didn't, like you said, Julie, she didn't really look at him for any kind of social security or financial independence. She had that on her own. The women in the Kotha are actually quite independent, and they don't need a man except for that little contribution that they make. So I guess that's all. That's his contribution to her or to me, and we are thankful for that, actually.
Otherwise you wouldn't come along, would you?
Yes.
Choitali.
Thank you, Julie, and good evening, everyone. It's very difficult to add anything else to what has been said about the novel already. But I'll share with you all what I have felt while reading the novel. Now, this particular book spoke to me in the sense that it's very close to my generation, Kolkata. The same Kolkata which is almost like a sponge absorbing all the cruel fists that were being hurled at her. And that was the most important point. I fell in love again with my city. I've come to an age where my city should be able to talk to me. And my heartfelt thanks to Manish that he has enlivened the presence of this city. And very tactfully, he has compared the quality of Kolkata by taking his narratives to other cities. like Mailani, like Pune, like Ahmedabad, and so on. So that was the topographical detail I wanted to talk about. And the most important aspect is encapsulated, I think, by Judith Butler. Ladies and gentle friends, I teach, so these names will come in whatever I say. So Judith Butler says, bodily matters and bodies that matter. So both these quotes are perfectly balanced in this novel, because the bodies that Manish is trying to describe, as Anasua just pointed out, is not just the female bodies, but also the suggested bodies. Even the kota itself is a body. How powerful a particular precinct can be for a woman, how a woman has to fight every bit in her life, especially a woman like Rekha Devi, comes to the fore in the narrative. I think there is a sort of biological narrative that emanates, which enhances our thinking horizon, and shall I say tickles our intellectual horizons. Because when I was reading the book, so many films came to my mind. Manish talks about songs which are very known to us, like Ye Kya Jage Hai Dosto. That was a song which sort of took to my feelings, and you won't believe, I tried to think of these films, well, Umrao Jan, many other films, of course, Pakiza, and very recently Raj Kahini was definitely springing to my mind when I was reading the book. And I would also like to say that somewhere there is a link with a woman functioning amidst masculine atmosphere, which is very similar to, it's held similarly in the book by Haraway, Anna Haraway, in a book called Cyborg Manifesto. She talks about this, where the nature-culture balance is explained. This book does exactly the same. For those of you who have not got the chance to be through the book, just let me tell you that after the childbirth, Rekha Devi is also shown to have postpartum difficulties, the depression, the difficulty to urinate, the difficulty to eat. Everything is brought together, and she sort of creates a fist which is unseen and carries on her work because she has to raise up her child. I don't know how to praise Manish over here. I would say a big thank you on behalf of not just his mother, all mothers, friends. They suffer endlessly to bring their childs up. You don't have to belong to this category. Any category mother sacrifices, and that is what he pays respects to. Thank you.
Thank you, Joytali, for that very comprehensive offering. I'm just wondering where our book club members on hybrid are. Shebonti, is Mr. Vivek Krishna here?
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, no, Mr. Krishna hasn't joined. Mr. Krishna hasn't joined yet.
Okay.
Dr. Paramita Mukherjee Mullik, I think she has left.
But
we have Mr. Vinod Pillai.
Are you sure Paramita has left? Because
Yes, yes, yes.
I saw her a second ago.
No, she has left. She has left quite a few
Yeah.
minutes ago. She has left.
Uh,
Mr. Vinod Pillai is here.
Our previous president, Mr. Kunal Sen, is here. Hi, Kunalda. Sitting in Italy or Ireland, I'm not sure. Kunalda, can you hear us? Will you unmute yourself, please, Kunalda? Yes, we can.
Julie, we are in Ireland, still in Ireland, but they mentioned that when we were hearing to this whole self-revealing episode of Manish and you people gave an introduction of the entire book. Unfortunately, I couldn't read it, nor could my wife Numa, who is here. But the thing is, that it is really, really very, very heartening to see that Manish has written about her mother and such a strong woman she was. And it is really interesting to know, and it really touches the heart. We were dumbfounded with it. And I'm still there. I listen to the whole thing, and I really thank Manish for writing this book on her mother and on the woman. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for hearing us out.
Thank you, Kunalda. Chris, would you have anything to say? Chris? You'll have to unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to reading this book. I haven't heard of it, but it sounds absolutely fascinating. And I so much admire that you actually took, obviously, endless trouble to make a record of your mother's experiences. And I just, I wish that I had done that. My mother died many years ago, and she was full of stories. But it never occurred to me to actually write down all those stories, because the lady that spoke earlier saying that there's so much in common between women who give birth to children and bring them up and have all those responsibilities, and the relationships we have in families between mums and daughters can be difficult. In particular, in my case, that was the case. And you miss so many opportunities to actually capture the personal stories, the fascinating personal stories. So I'm just in awe of the fact that you actually went to so much trouble to do that, to the extent that you could write her memoir for her in her voice. I mean, I'm awestruck, and as I say, I'm very much looking forward to reading the book. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Manish, this might be a good time for you to read something from the book. No, anything of your choice is good. Shibunti is yeah. I don't think Vinod has managed to finish the book. Vinod, are you there? Hi, Vinod.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
I'm just here as a listener. I'm just enjoying the conversation. I think it's inspired me sufficiently to go and get the book. I haven't really read it. As I told you, I was busy in the world.
Yes, but it's good. It's good to have you, because we'll be having a discussion on women's issues in a couple of months on another book. So it's good that you're here and that Chris is here, and you are both so active in our book club on hybrid. So that's good. Thank you so much for being here. Yeah, sure, fine. Yeah. We'll have Manish read to get a sense of the emotion. Hello, Dr. Mumtaz. Dr. Mumtaz. Shibunti,
Yes, ma'am.
can we have her on?
She is there, but I think she has muted herself.
Okay. All right, we'll come back to her. And if Dr. Paramita Mukherjee Malik comes in, please do let us know. Okay, thanks.
Okay, I'm trying to convince Anju that one of the women here should read this passage, because I think it sounds more convincing in a woman's voice, but she's insistent that I do it. No, it's okay. One morning, actually, I'm reading this passage because I've tried this in a couple of literature festivals, and it helps to sell a few more copies. One morning I stepped out, went down the building and was looking for a rickshaw when Pushpa understood I was going to the Howrah railway station. She came down and dragged me back inside, saying I could not leave. Why will you not even let me leave? I shouted. Where will you go? What will you do? She said. You will be torn to pieces by this world in seconds. Do you know who you are? I was aware of my reputation. I had earned it. I was a Baiji. Khangi ho, Randi ho, she shouted. Randi, she screamed and hurled abuses at me. A crowd gathered, attracted by the booming, harsh, and loud sound of that one word. I knew what it meant, but in her screaming voice, it came out like a radio announcement. Randi. It sounded horrible. I knew it had the power to stop any man in his tracks and make him stare. It also made everyone stare accusingly at the person who was being shouted at. I was being called a Randi. I was being disgraced. I was being humiliated in broad daylight in front of a crowd. She pulled at my sari. I felt naked, being harassed in public. The word was shrill and loud and deafening. Randi, that is how people saw us. I was not a prostitute, but how does any man know better than to judge us as one when one of our own is calling us a whore, a Randi? That was the first time someone had called me a name that I was not. In a public place, in an open street, where strangers were walking by, most of whom stopped to stare at me. Their eyes burnt into me. My skin crawled. The light in the sky was too bright, too harsh. Being dragged back from under the clear blue sky was like being pulled into a pool of darkness, into a pitch dark cave where I belonged, where women like me belonged. It was a worse feeling than leaving, to be forcefully pulled back from escaping, with the humiliation that I was no ordinary woman. I was branded a whore. I was stripped of any dignity I might have had as a nobody. This was a sickening realization that I had no place in the world when I had just about mustered enough courage to step into it.
Manish, this brings us to one of the core questions. A colleague of mine at the University of Toronto who's read your book, we were discussing your book, and one of the things she said...
It's traveled so far?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
It's traveled to London, and Chris will pick up a copy. Amazon, my dear. It's everywhere. So, the point she made was, why did you write the book? When you knew this kind of exposure to the kind of stigma that you might encounter from people, you knew that, and yet you rose above that and wrote the book. How hard was that? That's really one of the key questions of this narrative.
Julie, frankly, it really wasn't that hard, because my mother has always been wanting to tell her story. She's always wanted to be a celebrity. She always wanted the attention. She loved it. She thought she was born for the stage. She liked a good, rousing applause. So these are the things that sort of were always something at the back of my head, but I didn't know how to put it together. So eventually when we did it, it's the easiest thing to do. We don't think and brood too much about how tough it was, because if you think about it like that, then it will become tough writing it. And since we are, both she and me are people who don't go back and think worse things about ourselves and think about how somebody will receive it, or how it will lead to a backlash. These are thoughts that never really occurred to us. It's a story that she wanted to tell, and I was the medium, and thankfully I could type good enough by the time that we were ready to do it together.
Manish, I just want to ask you one question. I have absolutely no right to enter the world of your imagination, but what would be the next book that you are writing? Tell us something about it.
I'm writing a follow-up to The Last Courtesan. It's about my own journey growing up as a child in the Kotha. It's from the, I think it should be from the point of view of a 10-year-old, probably, because what usually happens is we hear a lot of stories about what happens to the girls in the Kotha, but we never hear about the boys' point of view. What happens to the boy? So the boys that I grew up with in the Kotha, some boys and some girls, and we all went to boarding school in Darjeeling or Kurseong or Kalimpong. Today they've turned out very differently from how I have turned out, and I can see why they are who they are, or why they are reticent about talking about themselves, and why they think it's not important to tell this story. I probably didn't think about it so much because of my own vocation as a writer for so long, but I didn't think about telling her story specifically till we both got an opportunity. I could, of course, put up the story on Twitter or on Facebook a number of times, but what is the reach of that? Where does it go? So it's only when we got the book deal is we made the best of it.
So Manish, this book that you're going to be writing, you're researching for it, you're in Kolkata. My mind is sometimes in awe of the fact that you are going to places where you were at a very different point in your life. So would you like to tell us about what you remember of the geographical spaces inside a Kotha? How was it? How was it really to live in one room with your mum and all these people coming in who were customers to see her dance and to see her sing? And then there was a loft inside, right? And a small kitchen inside. So most of us were so privileged to have our own spaces. And now you know, this is the other life that you've built. Tell us a little bit how that was.
Thank you, Julie. The Kothas are nothing like the ones you see in films, especially in Bansali's films. But we like that also. If you ask any courtesan what she thinks of Bansali's idea of Kotha, she will find them fabulous as well, because it's escapist from her own reality. And who doesn't want a little bit of glamour? And they like the fact that he makes them look so beautiful and rich and all of that. But the reality is these are very small rooms in very dilapidated buildings which have been in ruins for God knows how many years. And so if you see it from a child's point of view, it's still grand because your mother is making the best of it. It's shabby, it's dirty, it's unsanitary conditions, there is no bathroom, there is a difficult process of procuring water. I mean, you have the bhishtis at that time. They're still around, but I don't think anybody needs a bhishti now. So the Kothas that I saw in Calcutta and in Kamatipura in Bombay were hotbeds of crime also. There were a lot of criminals coming to such places, and these are not well maintained places. There's no money. There's girls are living in terrible conditions. But the what we see in films, how it's romanticized, is completely opposite, and that's the reality. But it's no longer there now. Now, when I revisit these Kothas, they have all been razed down, and new buildings have come up, and there are shiny corporate offices in those places in Lal Bazaar where once some kotha stood. So when I come back to look at what material I can gather to put in my own story, all those places have vanished. So it's only in my head, I suppose.
So those kotas are really, nothing is really there anymore.
Nothing is there anymore.
Wow. It's going to be, so the research is in your head?
Yes, absolutely. Few. I mean, in those days, we didn't have social media. Yeah. Otherwise, we would have been really popular, at least on the reels.
I think we'll pass the mic around because we have other book club readers who are here, and we've installed them with great hope that we'll hear their versions and a response. Let's see what they have to say. So,
please ask each other.
The iconic Mr. Arindam Sheel, who really is the hallmark of Tollywood and all things which are entertainment, film, etc. So, how would you answer to this book?
Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much, Julie Di. Hi, Manish. We have had a kind of a private discussion of my take about reading this book, but sitting down here, I'll come to that later.
You promised to make a film of that book.
I would love to, and I've been very genuine about that this story needs to be told. And very rightly have you pointed out, whether from Pakija to Hiramandi, that's not the real kotha that we actually see. And this book talks about that reality. But we have achieved something today. That's what I'm feeling very proud of. Do you know what? You yourselves have done it today, right now. You have turned Rekha Bai into Rekha Devi. And that's the biggest achievement. And that's your achievement of writing this book.
I noticed that, and I was going to thank them in the end.
Yes.
But you've done
now
it
I'll
before.
tell you that.
You've stolen my thunder.
No, because you guys told so many things that I wanted to speak also. But it's really true. And this is not for the first time. That is how the famous actor Kanun Bala went on to be remembered as Kanan Devi. Yes. Now, this is the biggest gift that you have given to your mother by writing this book. And I feel that you've done a brave thing. Your mother might have given you the courage, but it needs something more for a son to write so candidly, to hear exactly what the mother is saying about her sexual life and writing it down in her words. That takes a lot of courage. When I read this book, I never went into appreciating the literary aspect of the book. It's very candidly written, it's very raw.
Are you saying it's terribly written?
I just said it's very candidly written, it's very raw. But what is more important is the realisticness of this book. I happened to grow up at Bazaar, which is something about just about 500-600 meters from where the kotha used to be. I've seen that life. Also, there is this incredible misnomer in the mind of people about the flesh-fed prostitution versus the wives. And in Bazaar, it was very distinctly divided by the Bazaar street, Bipin Bihari Ganguly street. The left side is where the prostitute quarters used to be, and the right side is where the Tawaif, a few houses that you have mentioned. I remember when that Gunda, that famous Gun, infamous gun, Rashid Khan, about whom you have written, who did that blast, the blast which happened. We heard the noise and we ran up to our house, a terrace, and I still remember that we were showered by the dust of that blast, and that happened almost 500 meters away. There has been an incredible candidness with which the book is written, and I implore that we all read this, and that's, you know, my very first reaction of reading this book was filled with numbness, and there were so many thoughts which kept on. I actually asked Shukla that she should read it, and she read it in one go. Anybody who picks up this book will read it at one go. And this is a kind of a tribute, an incredible tribute that a son can do for the mother, with an incredible honesty and fearlessness. That is the most unique thing about the book, which I felt.
Arindam, if I might just say that what undergirds the story, and not many of us realize it, because the personal story, the familial story is such a powerful one. It's also a story about Kolkata.
It is, whether it's Kolkata, whether it's Mumbai, wherever the book takes you through, not just that. Somebody was pointing about the geographical aspect, the route. You know, this route has been the most common route of Tawaifs coming to Kolkata from Agra, from Pune, and I have done a little bit of research about, and that's the regular route. And at that point of time, Bow Bazaar was indeed very famous. After Lucknow and Banaras, Bow Bazaar was the place where Umrao Jan came and stayed, and that was the place where Ustad Amir Khan Sahab used to regularly come and visit.
Gohar Jan lived.
Gohar Jan was there, and Amir Khan Sahab used to regularly visit.
Thank you so much for those pointers.
Thank you.
First, Aditi, our newest member of the book club, and then Harish, Dr. Harish Mehta, and anybody else. We'd be very happy to hear.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Manish.
Hi.
Hi, I'm here. Hi. Yeah, everybody said a lot about the book. There's not much that I have to say about it.
I know they should stop, right?
No, I have a question for you. In an article I had read that you had said that the inside of the kota was heaven and the outside was hell. I mean, what do you mean by that? Why the outside was hell?
You've done your research. Thank you for doing that. Yes, I mean, for me as a child, it was a very shielded and protected world inside the kota. My mother gave me everything that I ever wanted, and because it was so colorful and beautiful, and oh, look at these women, my God, and the song and dance and music and the mogra and the endless supply of snacks when the patrons came. I mean, who will not find that heavenly? But it's when you step out of the kota, it becomes terrible for you as a child, because everybody outside the kota treats you like they say, randi ki aulad. So how does a child walk that street where he or her or the girl is being name called when they have done nothing to to deserve it? So it was difficult. So I felt wonderful inside, and I didn't quite like going outside. I thought I would grow up to be a Tawaif myself. I would have liked that very much, but I had no dancing skills or singing skills.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by your book, and I did read significant parts of it around the time Julie was writing it for the Telegraph, her review. And
That's
then
why
of
you're
course,
the most well-dressed person in the room today, to convince us that you've done more than enough.
so I have a couple of questions, and one is that when you began the book as a project, did you consult other great books in the genre? We've heard, roughly in the same genre. I mean, I'm thinking of internationally Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Henry Miller, and the other day I was reading Abdul Razak Gurna's one of his novels, where again the African practice was to sell their daughter away. If a businessman was in debt, he would sell his son, daughter, So that's the first thing. Did you kind of rove around the literature, as it were? And the second thing is, the father, of course, is in absence. And we have been working on this idea of the absent father, especially in the works of Michael Ondaatje. And because his father died of alcoholism, and then the family parted and he went off to England to be brought up by a mother who worked on the lower end of the hotel industry, and she raised him up to make him what he is today. But many of his poems and his books, he's constantly talking about this presence, which is this great absence. So, I mean, your book, of course, is a great song to your mother.
Aptly put.
Yes. So that for the father, what do you have? What do you have for him in terms of feelings, in terms of unfinished business, etc.?
So to answer your first question, what was the first question?
Did you read?
Did I read
the literature? Of,
so the initial idea was to write about all the courtesans that I grew up with in Banduk Gali, which is Kotha in Bau Bazaar near the Bau Barracks. So when I went out to meet some of them, they were reluctant, and because my mother said कि अरे ये लोग क्या बोलेंगे मुझसे बात कर, so then she became the research, and now because I'm telling her story in first person. Why do I need to research anybody else? I know for a fact that she's telling me the truth, and even if she's fibbing, I know where she's fibbing because I've been in the Kotha myself for half my life, and I know what happens there. So it's not it's a memoir. So it can't be about researching somebody else's, some other culture, and it's a first-person narrative. So I can't, forcefully push another narrative, a thread into it, which I can do in my version, because I can be reflective and analytical and say things that she probably wouldn't know about my mother. So it had to be very simple and straightforward.
Yes, I see that. Pardon my interjecting here, but I must revise that to say that your book must become a part of the literature now. It is already.
One hopes so.
Yeah, and not just for the general reader, but even for scholarly, because it is a primary document. As we've learned today, it forms a part of history, city history, gender history. So it is an important work, and through time, it will find its place in the shelves alongside the great books of the genre, a genre which goes beyond Gurna and Miller and Rousseau and that sort of thing.
And the second part of your question was about the absence of the father.
The absent father as a figure of intrigue, mystery, alcoholism. In the case of
I think he deserves that spot, and he should stay there only. So I mean, he is present in my version a little more. He's there in my mother's story also, but The thing is, he had zero contribution in our lives. So why should I dwell on him? I mean, there's an incident that my mother told me which I didn't know about for forever. It's only in 2020 or 21 she told me this incident where he kidnapped me. My father kidnapped me when I was 5 or 6, I think so. And he took me to his house. Now I do remember that one night I spent in his house with his wife and his 3 kids, and they had a cage in which they had these rabbits, and I was quite fascinated by those rabbits. And I remember this polite lady came up to me and gave me a tall glass of milk, and I think she must have poisoned it, so I didn't wake up for the next 24 hours. I'm joking. So he took me away, and then he called my mother and he said, you have to give me 30,000 rupees if you want your kid back. And so, the grand setting of the Victoria Memorial, they are sitting on a park bench and the money is being exchanged and the child is being given. It was so dramatic and so filmy. I enjoyed it secretly, but I also felt I felt a little bitter about this man for whom, for the longest time, I didn't feel any resentment. It's only when she told me this story very recently, I felt, should I resent him for this? But it's too little also, of course. So, I mean, there's not much I can, that absence just should be kept absent only. I met him once when I was 16 or 17. I came back from my boarding school in Darjeeling, and it was my birthday, and I went to his karkhana in Machua Bazaar. He had this shop where they made something with steel. I don't remember what. And I took a birthday cake and I said, it's my birthday and here is a cake. And he took out 50 rupees from his pocket, or I think 100 rupees, and he gave it to me and he said, Acha jao. And I thought, this is my father and it's my birthday and he can't even wish me. What sort of a father is this? So I gave him the money back very dramatically, like a tawaif, saying, itne kam paise main nahi leta. And then I turned around and I never looked back.
Manish, it's a heroic presence of yours today over here. I never dreamt. Because way back in 2000, when I went to Shonagachi, much of it resembles to what you said, and yet different. But I was shown even in the daytime, it was a whole day's research we were doing there, that the IS officers and the IPS officers' cars were waiting downstairs. And it was very interesting to see. She took us all the way up there on the terrace, and she showed us the curtains drawn, but that means you can't go inside and ask. Now, did you ever visit these areas when you researched?
Yes.
And also in Kalighat. These were the 2 places we did research on.
So we would go visit a few of my mother's friends in Sonagachi. And I could also, like you said, see the difference just in the mahal, in the setting of that place. It was darker and creepier and just very uncomfortable just to walk outside. And the girls were, I don't know, they looked harrowed.
It was quite shocking for me to see 2 contrasting places at Shonagachi. One for the very ordinary girls for who the IPS and the IFS officers were waiting, and then the Agarwalis was for the merchant community of Calcutta. And they were absorbed into that house at the age of 6 months. And they were trained for the job, which I cannot go into details. And, it was such a stark contrast, and I couldn't believe that life could be like this also for many people from practically birth.
That is true. I mean, which is why when I look at the girls in the Kota, they are they understand their fellow sisters who are into sex work for whatever reason that they are there. And the struggle is the same, and it's for dignity in both places.
This is very sad, touching for the Agarwalis, because they were young, teenage girls, very difficult to take in, whereas in the main Kotis, they were no more aged in that sense. Thank you so much for a wonderful chapter.
Thank you so much for hearing us out.
If there's anyone else, this is a good time to get the mic. Thank you. Please. Anyone?
I think everybody wants to read the book now. They're bored of us. So please collect a copy. No, you'll have to pay for it also, of course. And you can get it signed. And
This is a good place to...
and I hope you've had a good time as much as we did.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Julie.
Manish. Has been quite wonderful. Thank you. You've been a great audience, attentive and interactive. Thank you very much. We have these book club sessions every month, so you're very welcome to come. Thank you. Thank you, Manish. Thank you, Anju. Thank you, Anasuya. Thank you.
All because of you, Manish, we got lovely feedback.
I'm going to give this to Julie. No. This is for you. Thank you so much.
All of us should give it to you. Yeah, all of us together.